What if the difference between a day where you feel steady, clear-headed, and comfortable in your body, and a day where everything feels a little stiffer, a little foggier, and a little more effortful, comes down to a routine that takes less than 30 minutes and costs nothing? Most people over 50 have some version of a morning routine, even if it's largely unconscious. Get up, get dressed, have something to eat, start the day. But there's a meaningful difference between a routine that simply gets you out the door and one that's specifically structured to support your joints, your energy, your mood, and your long-term health, all at once, every single day. So today we're going to walk through a complete, doctor-informed morning routine built specifically for adults over 50, covering the pieces most general advice leaves out, why each piece matters physiologically at this particular stage of life, and how to fit the entire routine into your morning without it feeling like a second job. Before we begin, remember this video is for education only, and if you have a specific medical condition or take regular medication, please tailor any of today's suggestions in conversation with your doctor, since your individual situation may call for adjustments to what's covered here. Now let's begin. Most people ask, what should I eat for a healthy breakfast? But that's really just one small piece of a much bigger picture, and treating breakfast as the entire morning routine misses several other genuinely important pieces that shape how your body and mind actually function for the rest of your day. The better question is, what does my body specifically need in the first 30 minutes of being awake, given the particular changes happening in my joints, my bones, my hormones, and my brain at this stage of life? Because a truly complete morning routine after 50 addresses several distinct systems at once. Not just what you eat, and each piece plays a specific, physiologically grounded role that's worth understanding rather than following blindly. Here is why a more complete, structured morning routine matters increasingly after 50. Joint stiffness tends to be more pronounced first thing in the morning as you get older, since the synovial fluid that lubricates your joints moves more sluggishly after hours of stillness, and this effect becomes more noticeable with age. Vitamin D synthesis through sun exposure becomes somewhat less efficient as skin naturally changes with age, at exactly the same time that adequate vitamin D becomes increasingly important for maintaining bone density, a growing concern for many adults over 50. Managing multiple daily medications becomes more common at this stage of life, making a consistent, organized approach to medication timing genuinely more relevant than it might have been in earlier decades. And mental health and cognitive engagement benefit meaningfully from consistent, intentional daily practices, particularly during a period of life that can involve significant transitions in identity, purpose, and social connection. Think of your morning routine like the pre-flight checklist a pilot runs through before every single takeoff. Each individual item on that checklist might seem small or even unnecessary in isolation, checking the fuel gauge, testing the flaps, confirming the instruments. But together, that consistent, structured sequence ensures nothing important gets accidentally skipped, and it means the pilot begins each flight from a position of genuine readiness rather than hoping everything happens to be in order. Your morning routine can function in a remarkably similar way, a structured sequence that ensures your joints, your bones, your medications, your mind, and your body are all genuinely prepared for the day ahead, rather than simply hoping things work out because you got up and got dressed. Let's start with the first piece of this routine, and one that's often skipped entirely, a brief, gentle mobility sequence before you do anything else physically demanding. Rather than jumping straight from bed into your regular activities, spending 3 to 5 minutes on gentle joint mobility, such as slow ankle circles, gentle knee bends while holding onto something sturdy, shoulder rolls, and a slow, careful neck stretch from side to side, helps address the joint stiffness discussed earlier by encouraging synovial fluid to begin circulating more freely before you place any real demand on those joints. This is particularly relevant for anyone managing any degree of arthritis or general joint stiffness, since this brief mobility sequence can meaningfully reduce that first-hour stiffness many people simply accept as an unavoidable part of their morning, without realizing a few minutes of gentle, deliberate movement can noticeably ease that discomfort. The second piece of this routine involves a few minutes of natural sunlight exposure, ideally combined with the mobility sequence already discussed, stepping outside briefly or opening curtains and standing near a window with direct light. Beyond the role morning light plays in regulating your internal body clock, discussed in other conversations about sleep and cortisol, morning sunlight also supports your body's natural vitamin D production, a process that becomes somewhat less efficient with age as your skin's capacity to synthesize vitamin D from sunlight gradually declines. Vitamin D plays a genuinely critical role in calcium absorption and bone density maintenance, an increasingly relevant concern for adults over 50, particularly for women navigating the bone density changes associated with menopause, and even brief, regular morning sun exposure, 10 to 15 minutes when weather and season allow, contributes meaningfully to this ongoing need, alongside whatever vitamin D you obtain through diet or supplementation as recommended by your doctor. The third piece involves organizing and taking your daily medications in a consistent, structured way as part of your established morning sequence, rather than treating this as a separate, easily forgotten task squeezed in whenever convenient. Many adults over 50 manage 2, 3, or more daily medications and inconsistent timing, sometimes taking medication with breakfast, sometimes without, sometimes forgetting entirely until later in the day, can meaningfully affect how well certain medications work, particularly those with specific absorption requirements relative to food or other substances. Using a simple pill organizer filled weekly and placing it in a consistent, visible location as part of your morning routine, taken at the same point in your sequence every day, removes the mental burden of remembering and reduces the risk of missed or inconsistently timed doses. If any of your medications have specific timing requirements, such as certain thyroid medications needing to be taken on a truly empty stomach well before other substances, building that specific sequence into your consistent morning routine, rather than trying to remember it fresh each day, makes proper adherence considerably more automatic and reliable. The fourth piece involves a brief moment of mental or emotional check-in, something as simple as 2 or 3 minutes of quiet reflection, gratitude journaling, or simply sitting with a cup of tea or coffee without any screen or distraction, intentionally present with your own thoughts before the demands of the day take over. This stage of life often involves significant transitions, whether retirement, changes in family roles, the loss of loved ones, or simply a shifting sense of daily purpose and structure, and a brief, consistent moment of mental check-in each morning provides a small, protected space to notice your own emotional state before external demands begin shaping your mood for you. Some people find writing down 3 things they're grateful for, or simply naming how they're feeling that particular morning without judgment, provides genuine value, while others prefer a few minutes of quiet, unstructured reflection without any specific format. The specific approach matters less than the consistency of carving out this brief, protected mental space before the day's demands begin. The fifth piece involves a brief burst of light strength or resistance movement, distinct from general mobility, specifically targeting the muscle maintenance that becomes increasingly important after 50 as natural muscle loss, called sarcopenia, gradually accelerates with age. This doesn't need to be an elaborate workout, but rather something as simple as a set of 10 to 15 chair-assisted squats, a minute of wall push-ups, or holding a gentle plank position for a comfortable duration, performed consistently each morning as part of your routine rather than as a separate, easily skipped exercise session planned for later in the day that often doesn't happen. Placing this brief strength component directly within your morning routine, rather than as a standalone commitment requiring separate motivation and scheduling, tends to produce considerably better long-term consistency, since it becomes simply one more automatic step in a sequence you're already completing daily, rather than an entirely separate decision you need to actively motivate yourself toward each day. Now let's talk about the sixth piece, and this one involves a brief self-check of your physical state, something many people skip entirely but that provides genuinely valuable, ongoing information about your health over time. This involves simply noticing for a moment how your body feels, any new or unusual aches, swelling, changes in how your clothes fit, or your general energy level, and if you monitor specific health metrics like blood pressure or blood sugar as recommended by your doctor, taking those readings at a consistent point in your morning routine. This brief, consistent self-check, taking perhaps 1 to 2 minutes, builds a habit of ongoing body awareness that can help you notice meaningful changes early, whether a new area of joint discomfort worth mentioning at your next appointment or a pattern in your blood pressure readings worth discussing with your doctor, rather than these changes going unnoticed until they've become more significant or until your next scheduled appointment happens to occur. Now let's talk about the seventh and final piece of this complete morning routine, and this one involves a brief moment of intentional planning, taking a minute or two to genuinely look at what your day actually holds, your appointments, your responsibilities, and importantly, identifying at least one small thing you're genuinely looking forward to, whether a phone call with a friend, a favorite meal, or simply time spent on a hobby you enjoy. This small planning step, particularly the intentional identification of something to look forward to, helps set a psychological tone for the day that's considerably more proactive and positive than simply reacting to whatever happens to come up, and it's a particularly valuable habit for adults navigating retirement or other significant life transitions where the natural structure and social connection of a traditional workday may no longer be automatically providing this same sense of purpose and anticipation. Now, before we go further, let's debunk a few common myths about morning routines specifically. For years, many people believe that a proper morning routine requires an hour or more of dedicated time, making it feel impractical for anyone with a busy schedule or caregiving responsibilities. Some believe that morning routines are primarily about diet and exercise, overlooking the equally important roles of mental check-ins, medication organization, and joint mobility specifically relevant after 50. Some believed that a routine either needs to be followed perfectly every single day or isn't worth attempting at all. And some believed that morning routines are essentially the same regardless of age, without recognizing the specific, additional considerations that become genuinely more relevant after 50, including joint stiffness, vitamin D needs, medication management, and life transition-related mental health support. But when we look at what actually serves a body and mind at this particular stage of life, the picture becomes considerably more specific and practical. The real questions are not simply, do I have a morning routine, or does it look impressive on paper? The better questions are, does my routine address joint stiffness before I place demand on my joints? Does it support my vitamin D needs and bone health? Does it create a consistent, reliable structure for medication timing? Does it include a genuine moment of mental check-in during a stage of life that often involves significant transition? Does it maintain the muscle strength that naturally declines with age? Does it build ongoing awareness of my physical state? And does it set an intentional, proactive tone for the day ahead, rather than simply reacting to whatever comes next? Now let's build a simple, practical version of this complete routine you can start tomorrow morning. First, spend 3 to 5 minutes on gentle joint mobility, ankle circles, knee bends, shoulder rolls, and neck stretches before doing anything more physically demanding. Second, get a few minutes of natural morning sunlight, ideally combined with that mobility sequence. Third, take your medications at a consistent point in your routine, using a weekly pill organizer to remove the mental burden of remembering. Fourth, spend 2 to 3 minutes on a brief mental check-in, whether gratitude journaling or simply quiet, undistracted reflection. Fifth, include a brief burst of light strength movement, chair squats, wall push-ups, or a gentle plank, directly within your routine rather than as a separate commitment. Sixth, take a moment for a brief physical self-check, noticing any changes and taking any health metrics you're currently monitoring. Seventh, spend a minute or two intentionally planning your day and identifying at least one thing you're genuinely looking forward to. Let's talk about how all 7 of these pieces fit together into a realistic time frame. Since laid out individually, this can sound like considerably more time than it actually requires. The mobility sequence and sunlight exposure can happen simultaneously, standing near a window or stepping outside while doing your gentle stretches, combining 2 pieces into roughly 5 minutes total. Medication organization, once your weekly pill organizer is filled, takes only seconds each morning. The mental check-in, strength movement, physical self-check, and intentional planning together typically add another 15 to 20 minutes, meaning the entire 7-piece routine generally fits comfortably within 25 to 30 minutes total, only modestly more time than many people already spend getting ready in a less structured way. It's worth addressing what to do if even this streamlined version feels like too much to add all at once, particularly if you're starting essentially from scratch without any current structured morning routine. Rather than attempting all 7 pieces simultaneously starting tomorrow, consider introducing just 2 or 3 pieces during your first week, perhaps the mobility sequence and medication organization, since these 2 offer particularly direct, tangible benefit and require relatively little time. Once these initial pieces feel genuinely automatic, typically after 1 to 2 weeks of consistent practice, gradually add the remaining pieces 1 or 2 at a time, building toward the complete 7-part routine over the course of 3 to 4 weeks rather than expecting immediate, full adoption from day 1. Let's also address the reality that not every morning will accommodate the full routine, whether due to travel, an early appointment, illness, or simply an unusually rushed day. On these occasions, rather than abandoning the routine entirely for that day, consider which 1 or 2 pieces feel most essential to preserve even in a shortened version, perhaps the mobility sequence and medication organization specifically, since these 2 carry particularly direct physical relevance, while accepting that the mental check-in or intentional planning piece might need to wait until you have a few spare minutes later in the day, or simply be skipped for that particular morning, without derailing your broader, ongoing commitment to the routine as a whole. Let's talk briefly about how this routine might need to adjust seasonally, since the sunlight piece specifically becomes more challenging during winter months or in climates with limited morning daylight, particularly relevant for anyone living somewhat further from the equator where winter mornings can remain dark well past a typical wake-up time. On mornings when genuine outdoor sunlight isn't available or practical, a bright light therapy lamp, specifically designed to mimic natural daylight and used for 10 to 15 minutes during your mobility sequence, can serve as a reasonable substitute, helping support both the circadian rhythm benefits and, to some degree, compensating for reduced natural vitamin D synthesis during darker months, though it's worth discussing with your doctor whether vitamin D supplementation might be particularly relevant during winter months specifically, given the reduced natural sunlight exposure many people experience during this time of year regardless of how consistently they attempt to get outside. It's also worth mentioning the value of some form of accountability or social connection around this routine, particularly for the mental check-in and intentional planning pieces specifically. Some people find that sharing their morning routine goals with a spouse, a friend, or an adult child, even simply mentioning that you're working on establishing the structure, provides a helpful layer of accountability and encouragement during the initial weeks of building these new habits. Others find value in a simple habit tracking approach, whether a paper checklist on the refrigerator or a simple notes app on a phone, marking off each piece of the routine as it's completed, providing a small, visible sense of progress and consistency over the days and weeks as the routine becomes more established and automatic. Let's also briefly address hydration, since while it's been discussed in more depth elsewhere, it deserves at least a brief mention within this complete routine framework. Having a glass of water readily available and consumed early in your sequence, ideally before your first cup of coffee or tea, supports the mobility and movement pieces of this routine more effectively, since adequately hydrated muscles and joints tend to move somewhat more comfortably than those working with the mild, common dehydration many people experience upon waking after a full night without fluids. Now let's talk about tracking your progress with this routine over the coming weeks, since noticing genuine, cumulative change can be difficult without some form of simple record keeping. Consider keeping a brief note, even just a few words each day, about how your joints felt during your morning mobility sequence, whether your mood check-in revealed any recurring patterns worth noticing, or how consistently you managed to complete the full routine that particular week. Reviewing this simple record after 3 or 4 weeks often reveals meaningful patterns and genuine progress that might otherwise be difficult to appreciate day to day, particularly for the joint stiffness and mood-related pieces of this routine, where gradual improvement can be easy to overlook without some form of consistent, if brief, documentation over time. That works reasonably well for them, but doesn't include several of these 7 pieces. Before addressing that, it's worth briefly mentioning weekends and days without a fixed schedule, since many people naturally let their morning routine slide considerably on days without work or other early obligations. Some flexibility is entirely reasonable, and there's no need to maintain an identical, rigid routine 7 days a week. However, maintaining at least the core physical pieces, the joint mobility, and any medication timing specifically, even on more relaxed weekend mornings, tends to support more consistent long-term benefit than a routine that essentially resets or disappears twice a week, particularly since joint stiffness and medication needs don't take weekends off simply because your schedule feels more open. There's no need to discard a routine that's genuinely working simply because it doesn't match today's specific framework exactly. Instead, consider which of the 7 pieces discussed today feel like genuine gaps in your current routine, and thoughtfully add just those specific missing elements, rather than restructuring an already functional routine entirely from scratch. For many people, medication organization or the brief mental check-in tend to be the pieces most commonly missing from an otherwise reasonably solid existing routine. And what about people managing significant time constraints due to caregiving responsibilities, early work commitments, or other genuine scheduling demands that make even a streamlined 25 to 30-minute routine feel impractical? In this situation, prioritizing the pieces with the most direct, immediate physical relevance, the joint mobility sequence and medication organization specifically, while accepting that the remaining pieces might happen in a more abbreviated form or at a different point in your day rather than exclusively in the morning, represents a reasonable, realistic adaptation rather than abandoning the framework entirely due to time pressure. Now let's summarize everything in a simple way. A complete, doctor-informed morning routine for adults over 50 includes 7 distinct pieces: gentle joint mobility to address morning stiffness, brief natural sunlight exposure to support vitamin D production and bone health, consistent, organized medication timing to support proper adherence and effectiveness, a brief mental check-in to support emotional well-being during a life stage that often involves significant transition, a short burst of light strength movement to help counter age-related muscle loss, a brief physical self-check to build ongoing health awareness, and a moment of intentional daily planning to set a proactive, positive tone for the day ahead. Together, these 7 pieces typically fit within 25 to 30 minutes, addressing your joints, your bones, your medication management, your mental health, your muscles, your ongoing health awareness, and your daily outlook, all within a single, consistent morning sequence. But remember, this routine works best built gradually, 1 or 2 pieces at a time, rather than attempted all at once starting tomorrow, and it's meant to flex around the genuine demands of real life rather than becoming another rigid source of pressure or guilt on the mornings it doesn't happen exactly as planned. The goal is a routine that genuinely supports you, consistently, most days, not a perfect routine followed flawlessly every single morning without exception. So tomorrow morning, choose just 1 or 2 pieces from today's 7 to begin with, perhaps the gentle mobility sequence combined with a few minutes of morning sunlight. Practice those specific pieces consistently for the next week, Then gradually layer in additional pieces as the first ones start to feel like a natural, automatic part of your morning, building toward the complete routine over the coming weeks. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 7 pieces is already part of your current morning routine, and which feels like the biggest gap worth adding? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else watching this video build a more complete, supportive morning routine of their own. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe to Nutri, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more simple, practical health strategies for adults over 50. And next, watch our video on 5 walking habits that are silently destroying your knees after 50, because how you begin your morning and how you move throughout your day work together to support your body, your mind, and your independence for many years to come.